Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Orlando, for the nice introduction, and thank you to the Foundation for inviting me, EURATEX, to be part of this very festive celebration, also last night. And congratulations first to the laureates for their work that they have carried out. And maybe a special congratulations to the young researchers which are in the room, which were displaying their posters. Because from a European textile perspective, we need more young researchers working on textiles. So I'm happy to see many young people in this room, and I can only encourage you to continue working to the benefit of the textile industry. What I would like to do in the next 15 minutes or so is indeed to explain to you, to share with you how Europe, how the European Union is developing a new framework for the textile industry. How Brussels is reshaping the way we will do business in the next 10, 20, 30 years. And the short answer is there's a lot of change coming. And I'll try to keep it short and simple, let's say. Before that, just one slide of introduction of the organization that I indeed joined 3 years ago. So we are basically the official representation of the entire textile and apparel industry in Europe towards the European Union. So our job, my job, is to promote, defend, fight sometimes for the interests of the textile industry in Brussels. You can see the numbers there. So it's the EU 27 member states, but it's also Norway, Switzerland, Turkey, UK, who are part of the EURATEX family. We have the entire, let's say, the entire value chain represented in our industry. So from the fiber makers, whether these are man-made fibers, synthetic fibers, all of them, down to the final product. Whether this is fashion, apparel, whether this is technical textiles, medical textiles, home textiles, so it's all part of the EURATEX family. And once again, our job is to work with the policymakers to overall make sure that this European textile industry at large remains competitive, remains strong. We do not, just to be clear, directly at least, we do not directly represent the brands, the retailers, although I should say there is an increasingly close cooperation, very necessary, between the manufacturers and the retailers and the brands, as you were actually showing in your presentation about the initiatives you are taking from H&M. So there is more and more cooperation also with the retailers. So let's focus on this EU Textile Strategy. So a few months ago, the European Commission has published an official communication, they call it, EU Strategy for Sustainable and Circular Textiles. It's quite unique that the Commission, the European Commission, is developing and publishing an official plan, because that's what it is, for a specific sector. It doesn't happen every 10 years. It doesn't happen every 20 years. They released this on the 30th of March, and I will take you through the main elements. Why is there a dedicated strategy? Why did the Commission, who has a lot of things to do, a lot of priorities, why did they spend time with the Commission, with the member states involved? Why did they spend time to develop this vision for our industry? There are three reasons. The first one is obviously linked to sustainability. I think most of you are familiar with the European Green Deal. So this European Commission pushing very much to reduce the environmental impact of the industry, of society at large. Mr. Frans Timmermans, the Vice President, you may have seen him, the man with the beard in Brussels, is managing this Green Deal. And that translates into a lot of legislative initiatives across different sectors, across different activities. And textiles obviously gets into the picture. You know the saying, textiles is the third, fourth most polluting sector. You can discuss, but we do have an environmental impact as an industry. So when the Commission is rolling out this Green Deal, automatically they fell into the textile sector and saying, guys, what are we going to do to reduce your environmental footprint? So that's the first and very important foundation for this textile strategy. Second, though, this Commission is also trying to strengthen the industrial base in Europe, trying to reduce our dependency on external supplies. You may remember the story of the face masks, also probably here. And so there is a plan, an industrial strategy that has identified 14 what they call strategic sectors of the European economy, where Europe says we need to invest, we need to innovate, we need to support those 14 sectors. And you can see textiles, we can read it, is one of those 14. So in other words, the Commission is saying, guys, you have an environmental problem, but at the same time is saying textiles is important. And we want the textile industry in Europe to remain, to be competitive, to be resilient. A third element let's say underlying this strategy is the Commission or this European Union has changed, let's say, or is evolving its relations with third countries. Changed from traditionally the EU being very free trade focused without questions asked, I would say, towards a more critical relationship with our third countries partners. Thinking of China, thinking what happens in Myanmar, things what happens in Brazil with the forests, etc. So the EU is becoming more critical and is therefore adapting its trade policy, its relations with those third countries, to be a bit more, as it's mentioned there, assertive, so a bit more critical. And that, again, has an impact on the textile industry. You know that textiles is officially the second most globalized sector of the European economy, with strong, intense supply chains. So as the Commission has step by step changed its trade policy, so its foreign relations, you may know, but free trade agreements with India that are in the pipeline, GSP, I don't know if there are trade experts here in the room. So that has an impact on also the textile industry. So based on, let's say, those three main tendencies, the Commission published this strategy. And I just want to go through those 5 boxes because they really summarize the essence of what is the vision. So where does Europe want to go in the next few years? So please read with me the first box. So the EU vision is to say that all textile products placed on the EU market, so regardless where they are produced, all placed on the EU market, are durable, repairable, recyclable. To a great extent made of recycled fibers, free of hazardous substances, so chemicals, produced respecting social rights. That's what the Commission wants to see happening. So these type of textile products should become the reference, should become the norm on the EU single market. And it was interesting to hear your presentation, the H&M targets. They fit within that plan. So H&M has a good intelligence, obviously. But it's important. It shows that companies, retailers, large retailers, already anticipate what is the vision of the Commission. So it's a very strong statement, and I will explain in a minute. It's not just words. This will become law, rules, restrictions. So it's not a nice idea somewhere in developed by a bureaucrat in Brussels. It's hard legislation. Second, it's a slogan. It's not, to be very clear, it's not the EURATEX slogan, because sometimes people confuse. It's the slogan of Vice President Frans Timmermans, Vice President of the Commission, when he said, fast fashion is out of fashion. Sounds good, no? As a politician, to say this. Consumers benefit longer from high-quality textiles. The same idea. So to move away from this quick buy something, wear it once, throw it away. So durability becomes the norm. Reuse and repair services becoming widely available. So you wear something, there's something broken, instead of throwing it away, set up an industry that takes back, repairs, reuse, etc. Number 4, which is very important for us, of course, representing the industry, to have a competitive, resilient, and innovative textile sector, where producers take responsibility for their products along the value chain. That means due diligence, that means we need to know how that jacket has been made. Where does the fabric come from? How was it made? Where does the yarn, where does the fiber come from? And some of you are familiar, there are very political, complex discussions on the origin of fibers, for example. But again, it's important that the Commission recognizes that we need to have this competitive, resilient, innovative textile sector. And then number 5, and it was mentioned, I think you mentioned this morning, moving away from this traditional linear business model towards a circular business model. That's very much the bottom line. So move away from, you produce something with your supply chain, you use it and you throw it away, you burn it, whatever. We move into a circular business model. So circular, rather than throw away clothes, have become the norm, with sufficient capacities for recycling and minimal incineration. So this capacity issue is indeed a big problem. How do we develop and generate sufficient recycled material to produce all the textiles and garments that we need in Europe and worldwide? So this is the kind of the main 5 topics, and I think you've found that's clear enough. But what is important is that that vision is being translated into legislation as we speak. And on the slide, it's a summary. It's not even the full list of regulations that are being discussed. And I'll try to keep it short, but so under this regulatory framework, the first and most important is the eco-design regulation. I don't know if you have heard about this. This is a piece of legislation that will basically decide how you produce your textile products in terms of composition, the quality, the standards that you will have to comply with, the durability, that will force you, to adapt your information and communication of your product, the transparency, the traceability. So it basically will force you to produce your products in a different way than you might do today. There is big negotiations going on what is called the product environmental footprint. I don't know if some of you are familiar with the concept of PEF. Very, very difficult discussions. It's trying to set an objective reference. What is the environmental footprint of a t-shirt? And if that t-shirt is made from cotton or from polyester or from some other material, how do you measure that? What we try to do in this PEF is to set a benchmark, to say the reference t-shirt environmental footprint is X. Getting to this X is very, very complicated. The cotton people will push the framework in one direction. The polyester people will push it in another direction. And I can tell you there's big discussions involving some of the brands very much. But the idea, the ambition is to have an objective as possible reference, to avoid confusion about what has the bigger environmental impact than something else. There's a lot of discussion, more than discussion, preparation to introduce an EPR system, an extended producer responsibility. It's a kind of a tax. People don't like to use that word, but it's a levy. When you buy a textile product, a garment, there will be an additional levy on that product that should be used to finance, I would say, the whole recycling and reusability of apparel products. It already exists in France. If you go to France and you buy a T-shirt, you pay 10 euro plus a few cents. And those few cents are collected and put into an organization, which is called Refashion, which is, I would say, managing, coordinating the whole recycling of all the garment textile products in France. There will be compulsory an EPR in every member state, also here in Sweden. And it's a big discussion. How much will that tax be? Who will collect it? And for what will it be used? Is it additional income for the government to fill their deficit? Or can it be used by the industry to indeed finance recyclability, innovation, etc., in the making? There's legislation on due diligence, so more than before, companies are responsible for what happens in your supply chain, starting from the brand to the fiber. The Commission would like to have every single textile product to have a unique identifier, a unique passport, digital product passport it's called. A lot of discussions, how can we do that? Millions of products, but discussion is ongoing. Working on the microplastics, it was mentioned before. Try to reduce chemicals, big fights on certain chemicals. Try to address overproduction. So brands, I'm sure you know it, will be held responsible for products produced but not sold. So they will have to declare which part of H&M, sorry to always use H&M, but you are here, which part of H&M volume has not been sold. They will need to declare, and obviously that will put pressure on H&M to reduce overproduction, to make sure that we don't have this, overproduction. They also want to introduce a new eco-label. I know we have too many labels already, but the Commission dreams to have a more simple tool of information towards the consumer. So, like in electronic appliances, A, B, C, D, E, you know that, also here in Sweden, they dream to have something similar for textiles. How that would work, nobody knows. But there is compulsory textile waste collection already today. And so by 2025, you can no longer throw away your products. We cannot ship them anymore to Africa. So we need to manage, as Europeans, our own textile waste. And as EURATEX, we've done big studies with the help of a consultancy. We will have between 8 and 9 million tons of textile waste in a few years. How are we going to manage that? How are we going to turn that waste into value? We have a project called the Rehubs, where we're working with the industry to turn that problem into an opportunity. That's a different discussion. So a lot of legislation, actually there is more, that is in the making, and that will be rolled out in the next, let's say, between 2 and 5 years. So it's going to take a while, because it's very complicated, it's very technical, it's very political sometimes, but it is coming. And again, the direction, I think is clear. Quickly, along with all that legislation, there is also what we call a transition pathway. It's a nice Brussels bubble word. It's basically the Commission with the industry is developing a plan, like a work plan, to accompany that whole transition. So to make sure that the industry, the sector as a whole, can make that transition while remain more or less competitive. That's the plan. So there's a lot of work on resilience, so really studying what are the elements of resilience for the European textile industry. How can we support that? There's a lot of discussion on maintaining the level playing field, making sure that if European industry is moving up the bar in terms of quality, durability, etc., probably also costs, how do we make sure that our European companies can remain competitive vis-à-vis global competitors out there? Market surveillance. Again, the idea is that every product placed on the EU, on the single market, will comply with chemical use, etc. We import 25 billion pieces of apparel every year in the EU. 25 billion. How are we going to control 25 billion pieces? Big question mark. We need to work on that. But so, this pathway is all about, again, more the operational side. It's about investment in innovation, what you said before again, the need to invest in new technologies, new fiber applications, skills, so attracting young generation to work for the textile industry, make sure they have the right skills. It's all about, as we call it in Brussels, making this green and digital transition. I'm almost there, so this is just, if you want, the industry perspective. So from EURATEX, on behalf of the industry, how we look at this whole transition. Can it work? Or how to make it work? I mean, that's how to make it work without destroying the European textile industry. I mean, that's the bottom line. And this summarizes a little bit our vision. First of all, this regulatory framework is okay. As an industry, to be very honest, some of my members, entrepreneurs, are a little bit reluctant. They see all these rules coming from Brussels and they say, Dirk, too many rules. The textile industry is moving from an unregulated to a regulated sector. That we need to understand. And some people don't like it for political, philosophical reasons, but this is happening. We are being regulated much more than before. So what we say is that to make sure that the quality of that regulation is critically important. Meaning, if we set the bar high, is it high enough to be ambitious, but is not too high so that companies cannot achieve those standards? If the Commission would say, we want in 5 years all apparel products to be made from recycled material. It's nonsense, because there's not enough recycled material out there. So that's what I mean. We need to have a very close, and we are having a close dialogue with the regulator to make sure that this framework, this new framework, is realistic, is enforceable. For example, they say, we will ban 1,000 chemical products. You can no longer use 1,000 chemical products. But in fact, we don't know how to control it. Then we have a problem. If you put in a regulation that you will not, that upfront you will say we will not be able to control, why do you issue the regulation? SME friendly, coherent, etc. So the quality of that framework will be critically important. Second, we are as an industry pushing and pleading for support. The European textile industry is 90% more SMEs. Everybody knows the larger brands, clearly, but the producers behind, if I may say so, it's not Lenzing. It's many, many small, medium-sized, family-owned companies who do not have the resources to invest in green technology, in digitalization, in reskilling their people. So we are discussing actually with the Commission what we call a textile transition fund. So basically a big program that would help those companies, with financial support, with investment in research and innovation, in people. By the way, in energy, if I may, our biggest problem today, regardless of all this, is energy. Maybe less so in Sweden, but in the rest of Europe, and you probably follow the news in Brussels, it's our biggest problem. Some of our textile companies today are closing down because they can't pay the energy bill anymore. Closing down and relocating to Turkey, into Asia. So this whole reshoring trend that was happening because of the energy crisis is pulled back in a way. It's a side comment. So, second, we need that support. And then thirdly, very, very important, we need to make sure there is a demand for sustainable textile products. If consumers don't want to buy and don't want to often pay a premium for a sustainable product, it stops. We're finished. We can, as an industry, we can be committed to produce more sustainable fabrics, products. The regulator can create a beautiful framework. If there is no market, if there is no demand, what do we do? So here, we need to work a lot with the brands, with the retailers. We need to inform the consumers. We need to be more transparent, more clear, maybe simple in our communication. But there's a big, big effort to make sure that the consumers come on board. And we need to address the price problem, the cost of sustainable products, especially in today's economic situation. I think we all know how consumers suffer from inflation. It's very delicate to tell the consumer you have to buy, a jeans that was made of sustainable fabrics if it costs 10, 20, 30% more. If that same consumer has, challenges to manage his or her budget. So we need to be very, very careful on that. But it's something we need to work on. Also on public procurement, the authorities are a big client for textiles. The army, police force, fireware, hospitals. And yes, we should be green, but when it comes to procurement, very often the one criteria that matters most is the price. So there is a legislation on the table, green public procurement, so that it's not just the price, but it's also, the sustainability of the product that is important. So, good regulation, support to the industry, and make sure there is demand in a global context. Again, what I mentioned before, we have to be very careful as European industry, as European society, not to create a beautiful framework, a beautiful kind of setting, if it means that we become less competitive towards our competitors outside Europe, we are in trouble. And then the risk is that we would destroy our industry. So we have to be very, very careful about that. Voilà. Final slide is, what does all this mean on wood-based textiles? I'll keep it very short. It's been mentioned before. 6% of fibers, according to the statistics I received. So there is a great potential, for sure, for man-made cellulosics to increase their share in the use of fibers used. And I just want to leave that slide here. If you look at those words that I just throw together, what I mentioned before, durability, eco-design, recyclability, bio-based, these are the buzzwords that are included in the textile strategy, in that vision. And I think wood-based fibers fit perfectly in that strategy. So my very short, simple conclusion is that I think, even though EURATEX is fiber neutral, I should say, but I think there is a great potential for wood-based fibers as part of this strategy. Well, stop here. Thank you very much.